lead yours, because I was in the newsroom for 12 years and went from having no team to having a team to having several teams to running news operations to now here. So I understand what that climb is in an organization where you're not recruited to the top job, but you sort of earn it through, I think a couple of things. One of which is certainly in these trying times, just keeping your head up and being persistent. And there's a tangible benefit to that. But anyway, what I wanted to say to you too about Monica especially is that that's probably one of the best advocates you could have in this business. So yes, you are definitely blessed to have her sitting beside you, because she will operate to support you in every way possible, because she did the same thing for me. So congratulations. So not really a question.
Thank you. I've definitely noticed Monica's willingness to teach, to mentor, and to just be a great partner. So I'm very lucky.
Here. Okay. All right. For our question period, and hearing from the people, our political experts and our Democratic Party Biden-Harris campaign people, we want to keep the opening comments to 3 minutes apiece so we can get everybody in. And I'm lucky to have Nikole Killion here from CBS News, the congressional correspondent. And I wanted to ask Nikole to join in the questioning of these folks. So without further ado, let's move right ahead. And I want to hear from Michael Tyler and Quentin Folks about what they have in store for voters and potential voters as this presidential campaign moves forward. So which of you wants to go first?
All you, Michael.
Great. Yeah, I'll get us started and I'll kick it over to Quentin. Quentin is obviously our deputy campaign manager, so he is my boss. So I will quickly go before him and then turn it over and allow him to give a broader sort of state of the race update. But thank you so much for letting us join the group this afternoon. Very much appreciate the opportunity. So we obviously kicked off the campaign in April on the 4-year anniversary of the president first announcing his campaign for president back in 2019. And things have been up and running in earnest ever since. I joined the campaign a little over a month ago in early July. Really hit the ground running hard. So I think folks know, obviously finished the first quarter of the campaign on strong footing, $77 million in the bank. That's, we outraised Donald Trump 2-1, Ron DeSantis 3-1. And a lot of that was due in part to just the strong partnership that we developed with the Democratic National Committee as well, running a bit of a different operation this go around, making sure that we really leverage and harness the resources of the existing infrastructure that was so successful, not only in 2020, but in the 2022 midterm elections, where we had a historically positive midterm result for an incumbent president, actually expanded Democratic gains in the Senate. And so looking to continue that momentum in strong partnership with the party. But so far to date, a lot of our efforts have really been geared towards building up that infrastructure, making sure that we have the resources needed in a general election against Donald Trump or whoever emerges from the Republican primary. And then on the other end of the spectrum is making sure that we're holding them accountable, right, in the interim. They are running a primary that is essentially already devolved into a race for their MAGA base. It is not a conversation in our minds or in the minds of American people that is truly going to resonate with the vast majority of Americans. And so we are trying to put a spotlight on the level of discourse that they are having. We obviously have a huge opportunity to do that this coming Wednesday. With the first Republican debate in Milwaukee. I'm going to be up in Milwaukee. Cedric Richmond, our campaign chair, is going to be there as well. DNC chairman Jamie Harrison is going to be there. So making sure that we are holding them accountable, but also at the same time, while they're having their conversation within their own echo chamber, doing what we do best, right? Organizing with our folks on the ground, making sure that we are having conversations with voters, with the people who are going to be crucial to our efforts in the general election. So that's why Chairman Harrison is going to be doing roundtables across the state of Wisconsin, but starting in Milwaukee, doing roundtables focused on Black men in particular. just to make sure that we are engaged in having those conversations now, and that it's not a conversation that only happens in the summer and fall of 2024. So that is the main focus of what we're up to as of late. Actually launched fortuitous timing that we're having this conversation today, because we actually this morning just went out with a pretty substantive ad campaign. It's a $25 million advertising campaign that we are doing in the battleground states that Quentin will talk about a little later, around the country. And so it's not only, we're not only running a campaign that is speaking directly to the president's economic message writ large, but this actually constitutes the earliest and largest investments in constituency media buys for a presidential campaign right now. We have African-American media tracks running. We have Hispanic media tracks running. Our Hispanic media track is actually a Spanish language ad, and those are all going to be running in the battleground states. And so we're excited about that. We think it's very important that, we have these conversations again right now, so that people can remember everything that this president has done, hear the message directly from the president and the campaign, and that again, this is not going to be a conversation that only happens next summer and next fall. So we'll be, broadcasting the president's vision and message and contrasting that with the conversation that you're going to be hearing on the ground in Milwaukee with the Republicans this week. So a lot more to come from us, but we're excited about where we're at in the earliest stages of this campaign. But I will turn it over to Quentin, who is, again, my boss and our expert on sort of the path to 270 here.
Okay. Which are the battleground states, by the way?
I'm going to let Quentin's going to get into that. He's going to give the whole rundown on the map to the path to 270. Okay. All right, Quentin, you're on.
Thank you for having us, Richard. We really appreciate being here and being able to join you guys to talk about how we see that we're going to win this campaign. Michael did a really good job of laying out, the message frame and what we're going to do. And I think that the key point that I like to take away from, what we're trying to do on the messaging front is that this is not just about the negatives of the Republicans. The Democratic Party has to explain to voters what they're going to do, right? What the Biden-Harris administration has already done and accomplished for them, and what we're going to continue to do, taking this party into the future and America into the future, right? And so it's really 4 pivotal things, right? Lowering cost in the economy. We are fighting every day to lower cost and make America more affordable for working class families. Freedom. Protecting freedoms. And I think within that bucket, you can put whatever you would like in there. But, obviously the Republicans have overplayed their hand and overstepped on Roe and reproductive rights, book bans, affirmative action, you name it. Republicans are trying to take it away. And, at the end of the day, we're about more freedoms, not less. The third is democracy. And putting the world back on America, back on a global standing to be respected around the world. President Biden took office and immediately began to repair America's image on the global stage. And I know that that's something that a lot of people, necessarily might not be the first thing to go to, but that's very important, right? The way we're seeing across the globe. And so continuing to have that strong footing and remain solid there is also important. And then fighting back against extremism. You guys might have seen the vice president. She has been out and about. She's been in Florida, pushing back on the curriculum, the education curriculum. She was in Tennessee, pushing back on the expulsion of those 2 members of the state legislature. She's been in Chicago touting gun rights. And so all of those things are pivotal, right? The Republicans are going to continue to play for the MAGA base, as Michael said. And at every turn, it's also important that we don't take our eye off the message that we want to give them, American voters. But at the same time, they see that we're fighting for them and that we're not going to let these extreme things that Republicans are trying to force in states all across the country, right? A very sophisticated effort, sustained effort to take away rights at every level of government in America. But the core piece, and to your question, Richard, about how we see it, we feel very confident about our path to 270. And we see, most importantly, a number of ways to get to 270. The president and the vice president got 302 electoral votes last time. Over 80 million people voted to send them to the White House. And we want to build upon that. But it really starts with shoring up the blue wall. So we have to win Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. That is pivotal for us. We also have to hold on to the states that we put back into the blue column in 2020. And those states are Arizona, Georgia, and Nevada. So we won those states in 2020. We have to double down and win those states again. And then looking at the map this time around, and we started the conversation here, or somebody started the conversation here, but we chose North Carolina and Florida to expand into. Currently, North Carolina has a Democratic governor. Attorney General Stein is running in that race. The last 2 Senate races for Democrats in that state have been extremely competitive and extremely close. And so we feel very confident that we can put North Carolina in play with some investment, and that's what we're going to do. And then Florida. You know, one of the things that really is compelling to us about why we think we have a message and solid footing to stand on are the wins that we've been able to accomplish. So obviously winning in 2020 was incredible, you know, taking back the Senate, doubling down on it into 2022 and doing it again. And then in 2023, what we've seen thus far across the board with Wisconsin Supreme Court race, with the special elections in Pennsylvania, with the Jacksonville mayoral race flipping, Duval County, a bellwether county in Florida, it indicates to us, also special issue 1 in Ohio, it indicates to us that folks are turning out to vote on the issues, right? The issues that the Democratic platform is based on. And we feel confident that we're going to carry that messaging and that strategy into 2024. And so that is sort of how we see the path to 270. And obviously things are going to evolve. We're going to be responsive to, you know, whatever's coming at us throughout the next year and a half. But we feel very comfortable about where we are, where the president and vice president are right now. And so excited to get to work.
Okay. Nikole, do you have a questions for our team here? Nikole Killion.
Hi.
Yeah.
Yes. Hi. Good to be with you. And thanks so much, Quentin and Michael, for joining us, and kind of good to see you again virtually. You know, I just want to start off with the news that you announced today, just with the ad buy. If you can just kind of walk us through that and what you hope to accomplish.
What is the ad buy?
So we just went out today with a new ad buy. As I mentioned earlier, it is a $25 million buy. It's nationwide. It is actually going to start on the airwaves this Wednesday. So it's going to start ahead of the Republican debate. But it is running throughout all of the states that Quentin just ran through. It is going to be in Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, North Carolina. We're doing targeted paid buys with targeting Hispanic voters in Florida. So this is, you know, really, we've done a couple of buys so far, but this is the first real substantive buy. It's going to be a 16-week flight. So it's going to take us through the fall. And the idea here is, while the Republicans are having, again, their sort of race for the MAGA base, their extreme conversation, we're going to be on the airwaves, not only bracketing their, you know, their conversation that they're having, but this flight is also going to be running during some of the more high profile events, right? This is going to be on as the NFL season comes back, for example. It's going to be on during the World Series. It's going to be on just during the fall when people come back, start paying more attention and get back into their normal routines, their lives. So obviously more to come from us as we, you know, turn the page into 2024, but this is really the first substantive deep dive advertising campaign that we're doing. And again, I think for us, what we are excited about is that this is the earliest that we have done buys in constituency media, right? So the African-American media track, the Hispanic media track, these are, you know, core elements of the Biden-Harris coalition that we're going to be having conversations with on the airwaves beginning in August of the off year, which really is unprecedented. And that's just one aspect of this, right? Like, obviously the paid media campaign is incredibly important. It's, you know, your ability to literally broadcast, but this is going to be coupled with a lot of our organizing efforts that are happening both on the ground and through digital organizing, right? That's going to be a significant component of what we're doing. We actually held a training yesterday with about 2,000 volunteers to do a virtual training to focusing on relational organizing. So a lot of the messaging that we're doing here in the communication shop, our organizing department is doing with volunteers on the ground. So it's your text message campaigns, it's sharing and distributing content amongst your peers on your own social media networks, right? So we are sort of coupling what we're doing from a broadcast perspective with the same messages in an organizing capacity. Because again, we know that the most effective messengers are those peer-to-peer relationships, right? We can spend a lot of money doing the paid, which we should, but there's no substitute for somebody in your own network telling you about why this election is so important, why they are backing the president and vice president for their reelection efforts. So that's what the work looks like right now.
Okay,
Yeah.
let me get to two.
Oh, no, I was just going to say, you know, add on to that, you know, campaigns are about educating voters, right? And one of the challenges, quite frankly, which, you know, I say it sometimes and a lot of people find it difficult to understand, but just the pure breadth of accomplishments that the president and the vice president have been able to accomplish for American voters, it's a lot, right? And it's hard to understand, right? Unless you're entrenched in this stuff every day. And so these ads are really out there. Again, there is some contrasty stuff, but they are really talking about the accomplishments that the president has done, you know, how the jobs that he's created, 13.2 million jobs, right? Bipartisan infrastructure bill, the largest piece of legislation combating gun violence in 30 years, right? These are very large things that have taken place under this administration. And, you know, we have to educate voters about it. And so we're not naive to the fact that, you know, campaigns are solely about getting a message out to voters. And so we're starting that early and very pleased to be doing it with constituency media, as Michael mentioned. That's earlier than anybody's done it before. So,
and I guess just to piggyback
before you
off
do
of that more
is that Cedric
specifically.
Richmond right there? That
Yeah, it was. I was going to say, I believe our campaign co-chairman Cedric.
Hey, thanks for
would be
joining
me.
us. Okay, we got the big dog here too.
But I did just want to piggyback off
Yes.
of that, because I know a lot of these ads, as you mentioned, are targeted at touting the accomplishments of the Biden administration, targeted towards communities of color. But that being said, what is your messaging for this cycle, particularly for those who may be skeptical, given the rollback of reproductive rights, given the rollback of affirmative action, the student loan debt relief program being overruled by the Supreme Court, you know, stalling of voting rights, police reform? I mean, for those, particularly in communities of color who may be skeptical about supporting the president, again, what is your message to them?
Well, let me jump in here and answer that. First of all, I think that you give the voters the truth, and this gives you an opportunity to talk to them, to remind them that although the Republicans in Congress blocked the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, he did what he could do by executive order that was actually substantive. You look at voting rights, they blocked it in Congress. He did what he could by executive order. And you have to go through and I think articulate what those executive orders did. And then I think you give them the other hard truth is elections have consequences. And so for all of those who didn't think Hillary was good enough in 2016, we gave Trump 3 Supreme Court justices to appoint. And he was determined to appoint justices that would overturn women's reproductive rights. When this president had a chance, he put more Black women on the appellate court than all other presidents put together. Then when he had a chance to put somebody on the Supreme Court, he put Ketanji Brown Jackson. And then you just roll through the things that he had the power to do by himself, he did. And you have a president who's not afraid to say systemic racism, breaking down barriers, and equity and justice. And so you remind them of the day one executive order, you roll through the accomplishments, but you also tell them that all of those things were done with a 0 vote majority in the Senate. You had the vice president breaking the tie for the first 2 years, and now we lost the House. But I don't think you make excuses. I think you just, you do it. And so what I'm really proud of is the fact that why we're here now is because this campaign, just like the presidency, is led by values. And we're putting our African-American and our minority voters first because it's important to the president and the vice president. And we're going to continue to, I believe, educate people on the record, but also build more trusted messengers that have, for lack of a better description, street cred in the community, so that when they hear it, they don't spend the first 5 or 10 minutes saying, I don't believe it. And so I think that it's a good record to run on. Even you talked about student loans, but you know, the president did student loans with equity in mind, where Pell Grant recipients got double, and we know what those Pell Grant recipients look like. He put $5 billion on the side for Black farmers who were historically discriminated against by Department of Agriculture. Supreme Court overturned it, but he did it. So I think that you know, the important thing is to remind people of his actions when he had a chance to act.
Okay, Mary Chow had a question, and then Roger Witherspoon did as well.
Hi, Mary Chow, Scripps News. Question for Quentin and Michael. Michael, you talked extensively about reaching out to communities of color, Blacks and Latinos, but yet Asians are left out. It's almost like we're the invisible minority. What is the campaign's outreach to Asian Americans, understanding we're not a monolith, and there are multiple different languages and multiple different social economic levels to reach out to?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'll take that question. I think, you know, one of the things is understanding it. I just got done running a campaign in 2022 in Georgia where the AAPI vote was 4% of the vote. And you do have to reach these voters in very sophisticated ways. Print media is a big piece of the way that you reach AAPI voters. Again, just translating alone into several different languages, 20 plus languages at a minimum, is something that our campaign is doubling down on. Obviously, you know, we have to have targeted ways of reaching them on digital and Facebook. And again, I mean, the socioeconomic status, I don't necessarily think that that's something that just impacts the API. I think that that's across the board with Hispanics and Black voters as well, right? We don't see Black voters as monolithic, nor do we see Hispanic voters as monolithic. But so I think the messaging there has to be, but I think the sophistication of the way that we're targeting, both on digital, also making sure that we're down on the ground level with print media. That's very important to API voters within their own communities. And then, as Michael said, the biggest piece that I think, and one of the takeaways from sort of 2024 will be the term relational organizing. And you guys may hear a lot of different versions around it, but it's simply saying that we are in a period of American history and campaigning that people are getting their news from so many different sources that there is not one avenue that you can advertise on that is going to hit 80, 90% of your targeted voters. It's just not, right? There are kids unboxing Legos on YouTube that will get more views than anything that we could possibly do, right? And so the idea there, and that's just where they're getting the news consumption from. That's not answering part two, which is also equally important, is do they trust what they're hearing, right? And so the idea behind relational organizing is that they trust what they hear from a peer, from a family member, from a friend, somebody that lives in their neighborhood. And so we are really invested in making sure that our message penetrates into those communities so that then those folks can become validators and carry that message on. But you're 100% right. And it actually starts with giving them a message in a language that they speak that's native to them, so that they can begin to disseminate it. And I'm very proud of the work that our campaign is doing already to hit the ground running to do that as well.
What about on social media platforms on WeChat? Every Chinese person I know is on WeChat. And do you have representatives who are able to answer questions and be part of the forum on WeChat?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that, you know, with our social media platforms, everything, I know it's, you know, people want it to be as easy, but there's a security matter to every single social media platform, whether it be TikTok or Reach and all those things. And so, you know, we are exploring it. Reach is a newer one, but we are, you know, exploring it. I don't see it being an issue long term, but again, I can't speak to that for sure, but we know that it's there. And obviously we're making an effort to get there as well.
Thank you, Quentin.
Thank you.
Okay, we have to move on to our other speakers, but I do have 4 people who had their hands up or were in the chat. So let me get to them. Dominik Whitehead of the NAACP, and then Roger Witherspoon has had a question in the chat. Eileen Jones, and then Rebecca Aguilar. So let's go with Dominik first, and then the other 3.
Thanks, Richard. Mine's will be quick. Quentin, 2 questions, and Michael. One, love hearing about the expansion in both Florida and North Carolina, particularly for Florida. Could you go into detail a little bit? What does early investment, or will early investment happen in Florida, given so much happening in the state of Florida, whether it's the curriculum in schools, whether it's the governor, DeSantis, and things that he's doing to push back, and given that we have 3 Republican candidates coming out of the state of Florida. Then the second part to that, we just saw what happened in Ohio with issue 1. What does Ohio look like? I know you you lifted up the battleground states, but is there a potential expansion with Ohio or work happening in Ohio at all, just given the pushback that we saw with issue 1 a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, so I think one, when it comes to Florida, I think it's no different than our other battleground states. It starts with the investment from the top, right? So we are doing our television, our ad buy, our digital campaigning in Florida as well. And so that's one, not neglecting it from that. Two is going there, right? The vice president has been there. You have to campaign in these places with the folks that, you know, you're trying to get to vote for you. You know, as I mentioned before, the mayoral race in Jacksonville, in Duval County flipping, we saw a lot of Latino and Hispanic voters. There's also a lot of Dominican voters there. And quite frankly, to the piece that I just mentioned, not to take it back, but the sort of doubling down on the relational organizing piece, when I'm in Georgia and spending $25–30 million to try to get, you know, a percentage of the Hispanic vote to vote for somebody like Senator Warnock, they're talking to their friends and family members that live in Florida, right? People that look like them, that are related to them, that, you know, all of that is combined. And so obviously we have to communicate there, and then just building the physical infrastructure, right? And so we're going to be there. We're going to be campaigning there. We're going to be doing our ad buys there. We're going to continue to invest there and pushing back on that, because I mean, obviously, you know, Florida, I know a lot of people don't like when I say this either, but I think is of Democrats' own making, because it was abandoned. I think if you look at the investment that went into Florida when Andrew Gillum was running versus the investment that has gone into Florida the last couple of cycles, it's dropped by hundreds of millions of dollars, right? So we cannot no longer just like abandon states. And this is a make or break year from Florida. And again, obviously Republicans think that they can win it, right? Because they have 3 people from the state running. So we're going to be right there combating it. It's not a state that we can abandon. And so really happy about that. And then I think, what was your second question?
Ohio, what does that look like? Just given what we're seeing, we saw historic off-year turnout a couple of weeks ago, clearly there for issue 1 in Ohio. So what does that look like, given that it has been a traditional battleground state in years before? What does that look like with you all going into 2024? I noticed it was not lifted, but I know there's a potential that many groups are looking at.
Yeah, look, I think Florida or Ohio has obviously one of the probably strongest you know, workers' rights and labor activists on the ballot, and Senator Brown. We're going to do everything we can. The other piece that I want to sort of clarify, I guess, and I think, you know, this is a good lesson that we should start doing this across the board. When we talk about sort of the presidential election, how we won the presidential election versus the sort of priorities, our team was making calls, millions of calls, text into Ohio, right, for issue 1 through the DNC. The part about, you know, why this campaign has been able to do it, there was a lot about when is President Biden going to announce? When is President Biden going to announce? The reason that he could delay announcing so long is because he had instructed Chair Harrison and the DNC to continue to invest in states, right? And so just because it's not on a list does not mean that the DNC is not investing in it. This year alone, we're investing in things like Ohio Special Issue 1. There's the Louisiana's governor's race. There's the Mississippi governor's race. There's the Kentucky governor's race. None of those are on sort of our list of states for the presidential. However, they matter because, again, it's the issues that these people are turning out to vote on. And at the end of the day, one of the best ways to keep momentum going is to keep winning, which is why after 2020, when the president won, he didn't just say, hold all your resources. He instructed the DNC to invest heavily in states like Georgia and states like Arizona so that we could win those states in 2022. And then coming out of that, every single special election that has been run thus far in 2023, the DNC has invested in. And we're going to continue to do so all the way throughout. And so if the dynamic changes enough on a polling level, that Ohio is back into play, we're absolutely going to be there. But holding the Senate is absolutely critical for us. It's not enough just to get the president and the vice president reelected. We also have to hold the Senate and make sure we do that and win back the House. And so it's top of our list, and the DNC is going to be right there every step of the way investing in these states.
Okay, thank you. Roger Witherspoon.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everybody. Quentin, when you talk about investment in places like Florida, could you be specific and give us an example? Just how are you tackling their effort to control education so that slavery is not a bad thing, for example? Just how are you going at that? What are you doing specifically when you say you have these large ads targeting what they're doing?
Look, I mean, look, I don't, I try to not be unrealistic in the responses that we give to this. But at the end of the day, I do think it's about, as Cedric said, talking about what the president and the vice president have the ability to do in their power, right? Like in order to stop some of the stuff that is happening in Florida, a change has to be made in the legislature, right? Like that's a different type of task. But I think it starts by taking the time of the vice president of the United States and sending her there, right? She saw this and said, I got to go to Florida to push back against that. I think it's making sure that voters know that the folks that they are voting for, as Cedric said, elections have consequences, are doing these things, are pushing for them, right? And again, for us, it's communicating, and then the physical infrastructure of like being there, being boots on the ground, and that relational piece, right? So, I think it starts by making sure that folks know that the president and the vice president are doing what they can on this front. But that does not mean lying to voters about, what can be done. These things are happening in Florida because of the doubling down in the voting that has happened, that has put Republicans in the state legislature. We're not going to be able to change that in 2024. But what we can change is that to let the voters of Florida know that we're not going to stand for that, and that's not going to be a priority. But we can't say that and not physically be there on the ground and investing in it. And I think trying to turn that state blue in 2024 will hopefully lead to changes in the state legislature that then lead to changes in things like this not happening. And so again, it's just that investment in the communication and physically going and campaigning there for us that, is what we can do and what the president and the vice president can do on that now.
Well, okay, I've got a request there for both Quentin and Michael to share your contact information in the chat, if you would.
Yeah, we can drop it in the chat. I'll drop mine in the chat.
Okay, thanks. All right, we have Eileen Jones.
Hi, I just have a quick question, and I agree with you that it's been phenomenal what the president has accomplished while in office. However, for the voters that I have talked with, that's not going to mean much if they are worried that the president's going to be in a nursing home in a week. So I guess I'm wondering, how are you guys addressing the age issue, or is that something that comes later?
Let me take a shot at that, and I'll be very quick with it. We're not going to take the proposition, and we're not going to let people change the fact that wisdom and experience is somehow now a bad thing. I think you have to point to the president's record. You could point to his schedule. You could point to his working out. But for the people who are focused on that, it means that they're taken away from the record accomplishments and all the other things. And I think we're going to stand by his record. We're going to talk about his experience. And look, it was his experience in world affairs that led him to unite the West against Russia when even the Ukrainian president was saying, Russia's not going to invade. And he was mad at President Biden. And President Biden was like, no, the 100,000 troops on your border are not there for a picnic. They're there to invade, and we're united. So he united the entire West to do that. So we're going to hone in on his experience, his wisdom, his know-how, and his record of what he's been able to do since he's been there. But we're going to spend a lot of time, talking about the fact that he works out every morning and does all these other things. Probably not. We will stay, because at the end of the day, we believe, and I know the president and vice president believe this, that the election is not about them. The election is really about you, your community, and your families. And every chance we get, we're going to remind people that the president wakes up every day along with the vice president. She wakes up every day with the American people on their mind and how to improve their life. And so it's just a hard fact, but you can't win an argument about age. You just have to remind people that age and wisdom is not a bad thing. I won't mind for one moment having an experienced and wise heart doctor. As smart as I think I am and as young as I think I am, I don't want me operating on my heart. I want somebody who has the experience and who's been there, like the farmer's insurance commercial. I know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two. So we're just going to, I just think that as people talk about that, we have to talk about the accomplishments and remind people that it's a team effort. It's led by the president and vice president, but it's an administration-wide value system and effort. But thank you for that.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mary Curtis and then Allison Keyes and then Nolu, and then we have to move to our other speakers. All right,
Yeah.
Mary.
Yeah, I'm at Roll Call and Slate, which is based in DC, but my home base is Charlotte, North Carolina. And North Carolina just passed some voting restrictions that'll allow poll watchers to listen to conversation and take notes, and eliminate the 3-day cure rate for absentee ballots. And we also are going to have a lot of redistricting, and with the Republican-controlled legislature, it's probably going to stand. So my question is, turnout and getting your message out is one thing, but with so many states having laws that are actually going to restrict voting, particularly among people of color, and put in obstacles and have these poll watchers, which has been called, intimidation, and also redistricting maps that you can have minorities ruling because they're not statewide. What is your strategy to hit at these things that more turnout may not really affect, because you have these baked in districts and you have these voting restrictions? I know this, the court just threw out Georgia's that said you can't give people water in line, but you've got this all across the country. What are you going to do?
Well, let me take a stab at that too. One, we're going to continue a two-pronged approach. We're going to continue to fight them in court. You mentioned redistricting, but if you're going to mention redistricting, you have to mention the fact that we just won a monumental case in the Supreme Court, which is going to make states like Mississippi, South Carolina, Louisiana, Alabama redraw their congressional maps, because the court has ruled that if you're 1/3 of the population, you should have 1/3, or African Americans should have the ability to elect a person of their choice in 1/3 of those districts. And that may be a pickup of 4 seats.
Alabama defied that though with their new map.
Yeah, but it doesn't end there. I mean, and I'm not trying to be argumentative, but it doesn't stop because Alabama went back to the legislature and did it. It's going to work its way back to the Supreme Court, and I think that their tactic is a delay tactic. The restrictive voting rights laws, which you're absolutely correct about, a lot of the ones we're seeing in North Carolina were in place in other states in 22, and you have to spend time and resources educating and equipping voters to deal with it, while at the same time you attack those in court, because you're right. If you don't control the legislature, you're not going to change them. So that leaves you 2 options. That is to fight them in court, which we're doing. And then that means educating and giving voters the resources and the help to navigate around those restrictive laws. And it's not right, but I don't think that we have the luxury to just hope that it changes. We have to equip people, and we have to continue to fight them.
Thank you.
All right, Allison Keyes.
Hi, everybody. Nice to see you on this Sunday. I hate to go back to the AIDS issue, but I have to do it. My parents are 82 and 83, right? And they are both dealing with a lot of health issues. My father has had a series of strokes. My mom has been ill. And she literally just said to me yesterday, how do Democrats think that people are going to vote for this president who they like? But they feel like if they feel they're too old to do a lot of things, much less have somebody to run the country at that age, how do you talk to people that have that concern? And I'm talking senior citizens, not the 12-year-olds.
I mean, Cedric, I don't, it's hard to answer the question any other way than Cedric answered it. And again, not to be combative within it, because I understand, but the logic of the question is almost as though just because I feel this way, somebody else feels that way, right? Like that's a very hard thing to combat. But again, by entertaining it falls right back into where Republicans want us to fall on, because if you're talking about that, at the end of the day, like what we're doing is showing the president is being active, the president's campaigning, the president is going overseas, the president, you know what I mean? I'm not sure about your parents' situation or other senior citizens and how much they're doing, but I can tell you that Joe Biden every day is getting up and traveling. He's going to Maui. He is responding. He's being the president of the United States. He's going to NATO. He's going to UNGA in New York. So at the end of the day, all we can do is, show that the president is working by doing that, and not saying, oh, the president has a busy schedule because of his age. Like that's not a relevant leg for us to stand on, because at the end of the day, we know what Joe Biden is doing. And the fact that the Republicans are going that way, one, is a baseless attack against Kamala Harris that they're trying to get at ultimately. And then two, is the fact that they're trying to turn his age and experience and wisdom back on us. And we're not going to allow that to happen.
Okay, I get it, but there is not a single voter that I have interviewed that has not raised that I have spoken to in the last couple of months. I'm just saying.
Okay, no.
The other part I would add to that, because I do think it's valid, but it's not like President Biden's going to be running against a 35-year-old. He's going to be running against somebody who's basically the same age, who sows chaos and division. But the other thing is, I think the president will continue to perform. So if you look at his numbers, and if you look at the responses after last year's State of the Union, I think that it squashed a lot of the questions. He has another State of the Union that will be coming up in January to March, and he'll perform like he always does in those big moments. And I think that that's the best way to fight that, is for him to continue to show leadership and vigor. And I think that, there's quantifiable data on America's response to a State of the Union. So I just think that that is the way we deal with it, and then remind people we're not running against the almighty, we're running against the alternative. And so, the difference between President Biden and Donald Trump's age is minute.
And Richard, can I say something real quickly?
Okay.
I just want to say two things real quickly. One is, yes, it's important to appeal to a person's logic and rationality and being able to think through the accomplishments of a person. You have to also appeal to people emotionally so that you hit them in their heart and in their gut. To me, one of the ways of doing that is to show accomplishments of other people. I heard, and this could be a rumor, that Col Sanders started Kentucky Fried Chicken when he was in his 80s. I mean, there are lots of people who have accomplished a lot of things at an older age. And so maybe that's one of the ways, not by just telling, and Fox News has been promoting this, but the point is that it's working. There are people who are believing that that is one of his weaknesses, is that he is too old. I'm through.
Okay, all right, Nolu.
But can I know you want to move on, Richard, but I do just want to press Cedric real quick, and the team, just to be clear that we're understanding you correctly. I mean, at this stage in the game, are you ginning up for a rematch against the former president? I mean, do you see him as being that general election opponent for you?
It's imperative for us that our campaign is ready to compete regardless of who the Republicans select. And part of that, I think, comes from everything that we said thus far about our messaging being based in what President Biden has accomplished, and what he wants to continue to accomplish is based in the motto of the campaign, which is finish the job, because he has more work left to do on top of everything else that he's accomplished. And we're asking Americans to send him back for another 4 years so that he can finish it. But again, that's not based, and we don't only want to have a strategy that we feel we can complete if Donald Trump is on the Republican side. It doesn't matter who our opponent is.
And the fact of the matter, too, is if you look at the way that the entire field is running, if anybody else emerges, they will have done so because they have positioned themselves as extreme, if not more, than Donald Trump. So the contours of the race, regardless of who the Republican nominee is going to be, are going to be very similar. So, we are running our race, preparing for a general election by making the investments in the infrastructure right now, by beginning to communicate the president's record of accomplishments with our core constituencies, by being up on the airwaves and talking to our folks. But the ultimate competition, right, the one-on-one choice is, I think we have a pretty good understanding of what the dynamics at play are going to be, regardless of who the Republican nominee ends up being.
Okay, now Nolu, and I'll point out that Nolu was the very first person to RSVP when she heard the topic.
Yeah, I'm very excited about this. Good afternoon to everyone. Good day, and thanks for our speakers and you too, Richard, for putting together these things. I hope most of you read that Daily Beast piece recently, which basically framed this whole thing, Biden's accomplishments, as the end of Reaganomics, which I think is humongous in terms of talking points. I came to Washington from Chicago in 1980. I like to say I came in with Reagan and saw the destruction, right? And after spending a decade in Africa in, I don't know, 10 or 20 different countries, I know what a coup looks like. I know as bad as things are for many people, things can get worse. And so my question has to do with the talking points around the economy. Yes, I am concerned personally about the democracy. My grandsons who are in their 20s, you know, they don't know civics. Apparently at some point the schools stopped teaching civics. They don't care about democracy. They ain't spent time in Africa, some other places. What they care about is, despite education, they can't make enough money to rent an apartment. This business of $15 minimum wage is ridiculous. I mean, who in the area can live on $15? So here's the question. What are the talking points around the economy, especially, okay, the CHIP Act and the whatever infrastructure, all this is wonderful. But right now, a lot of people are feeling pain. I live in a community with 62 plus. We have people in their 70s getting eviction notices on their doors. Can you imagine, in the DMV area? So my question is, people are still feeling pain. What are the talking points to get people excited about things are better or will soon be better and will be better for them when they are still in so much pain right now? Thanks again.
Yeah, I'll start, but I'll turn it over to Cedric or Quentin as well. You talked about Bidenomics at the top, and I do think it's important that we talk about that, right? Because Bidenomics is not just about the legislative accomplishments, right? It's not just about the CHIPS and Science Act. It's not just about the Inflation Reduction Act. It is about the articulating the underpinning philosophy, right, and the motivations of this president and this vice president. You know, they understood when they took office that it wasn't going to be enough to just go back to the economy that we had before the pandemic. We'd faced the worst, you know, downturn since the Great Recession. But they knew that even before the crisis that we had in 2020, we were dealing with an economy that was plagued by rising inequality, by disinvestment from communities of color, you know, that goes back decades, right? And so this was about making an articulation of an entire economic philosophy, right? Growing the economy from the middle out and the bottom up versus what we had seen for decades, which was that Reaganomics approach of give tax breaks for the wealthy, give tax breaks for corporations, and hope and pray that that money trickles down to folks who are just trying to get by. It is a rejection of that philosophy and the creation of a philosophy that knows we need to grow an economy from the middle out and the bottom up. And so when you look at the early results of that, right, when you look at that we've got the lowest Black unemployment, you know, rate on record, when we've achieved the highest level of African-American labor force participation since before the Great Recession. When you look at, you know, 13 million new jobs created, 800,000 manufacturing jobs. When you look at those results, that's not just a byproduct of the legislative accomplishments, like that is the intent of the accomplishments. And so it's incumbent upon us as a campaign to articulate that, also articulate that the job is not done, and then thirdly, articulate what the contrast is with the Republicans who explicitly want to roll back the progress that we have made. We know that the job is not done, and there are things that this administration wants to accomplish over the course of the next 4 years, and pitting that against Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, and others who are being explicit about the fact that they want to take us back to the economy we had that did nothing to help people.
Michael, what I would like you all to do, especially for these younger folks, I guess they're the Gen Zs, is to really hammer that, because they're not getting it. All they know is they work in these little piss ass jobs that don't pay any money. They don't see a future. They don't see hope. So somehow, because we need those votes of the young people, they don't understand the democratic process. And somehow all the surrogates have got to be hammering, okay, you may not feel it now, hang in there, change is coming, and all those points that you just mentioned, even though they're still feeling pain. Good luck with that.
Okay, we're going to move on to the other speakers here because a big piece of this discussion is about voter suppression and voter turnout. And so I want to ask Dominik Whitehead of the NAACP to give us his 3 minutes. He's the vice president of campaigns for the NAACP. And I just finished reading a piece about what the NAACP was doing or had done last fall in Tennessee, in Memphis in particular, to gin up that vote. You can tell us, I'll talk a little about whether that was successful, and I think that was a test to replicate in other southern states. So Dominik, take it away, please.
Yeah, thanks, Richard. Afternoon again, everyone. Dominik Whitehead, NAACP. So a few things. I'll take it two different ways, Richard. You mentioned the work we did last fall or late last summer in Memphis, so we focused in on a DA race there in the city or the county of Shelby County, where Memphis, Tennessee is located, where NAACP was able to increase Black voter turnout. The DA there at the time, or the incumbent at the time in Memphis, is a DA who has been in that seat at that point for over 8 years. She was a Republican DA. Clearly, NAACP is nonpartisan. However, we are not blind. And so one of the things that we noticed when you look at Shelby County is over 50+% African American. And then having a county that's over 50+% African American, it didn't make sense to not have a friendly DA. And so what NAACP did, what we'll be doing throughout the 2024 election cycle, is also focusing in on those down ballot races where we know it impacts communities of color, DA races, city council races, mayoral races, et cetera, down at the local level to increase turnout at the top of the ticket. And so we increased turnout there in Memphis, but it connects back to the larger question you asked a second ago, Richard, around voter suppression overall. When it comes to this upcoming election cycle, there's no secret we're going to continue to see mis and disinformation, but it's happening. Someone mentioned earlier on the call, and forgive me, what's happening in North Carolina with the poll workers that happen in so many southern states and what that looks like overall in terms of protecting the polls. One of the things that we launched off last year in 2022, and we're in the process of expanding what that looks like real time, is our National Voter Protection Hub. We launched it off with Esri. Many of you may be familiar with Esri, the mapping giant that does a lot of the mapping for 70+80% of the world, actually. But we are targeting in real time issues that are happening on the ground, and then also doing some advanced targeting where we can foresee issues that are happening when it comes to the upcoming election cycle. We're testing that out now this year a little bit more in places like Mississippi, Virginia, and Louisiana. But our goal is to build a large coalition of volunteers, experts, legal experts. We're in partnership with many of our civil rights groups on the ground in all things voter suppression, voter turnout. We'll continue to see this state by state. I like to use Georgia as an example. I feel like every legislative cycle in Georgia, there is a new voter suppression law in some way. But we continue to see increased turnout regardless of those voter suppression laws of minority Black voters and or voters who are in communities that don't have access to the ballot box. One of the things that we're working on right now, many of you may have saw what happened in Florida most recently with the voter registration piece. We're seeing some wins at the courts, but there's still some issues that we're having there.
Wait, what happened with the voter registration piece in Florida?
So in Florida, there's no third-party voter registration. Folks were kicked off the rolls for mail-in ballots there in Florida. So if you all have registered to have to vote by mail and or mail-in ballot, you actually have to sign back up in real time every election cycle to get your mail-in ballot. Within past election cycles, when you signed up in Florida, I believe you would have had it for 4 to 6 years before you had to re-sign up to get the mail-in ballot. There's an issue right now in real time in Florida and a few other southern states as well, where folks are being purged off the rolls if they did not vote in the last 2 election cycles. So NAACP is aggressively on the ground with many of the partners and groups there in Florida. I don't want to get ahead of myself, but we'll be launching something very soon soon in states. That's why I asked you the question, Quentin, a little earlier about the investment in Florida, or what that will look like on the ground in Florida and a few other states when we are seeing increased attacks on things like voter registration, or attacks on mail-in ballots, or attacks on drop boxes. Much of that we saw in 2020 due to COVID, and now folks are taking that back, and we're trying to make sure we keep many of those things in place. So an aggressive voter turnout program for NAACP, but our number one priority is protecting the ballot box for all communities, but particularly for communities of color, African-American communities. We're again launching off our voter hub that we launched off last year during the midterm election cycle. We're expanding that out this year, doing some testing in 2023, but ready to expand it out going into 2024. Again, we're partnering with ESRI, and a lot of the stuff that we'll be able to do, we'll be able to target in advance, be able to try to combat as much as we can in advance, but we'll be ready to go for any issue.
What is ESRI?
ESRI is a data hub, mapping data hub. It may be the largest mapping hub in the country, or in the world for that matter. They do a lot of mapping for city, county, states across the country. It helps us to decide all things from development to voting to targeting, et cetera. And so we are in a deep partnership with our Voter Protection Hub with ESRI, along with many of our other partners, Lawyers Committee, National Urban League, et cetera, as well, National Action Network, you name the entire civil rights cohort in some way. And NAACP is leading this, given the fact that we do have the resources to do a targeted data analysis program, 50-state data analysis program, and then connecting that back to where we're seeing issues in states, or where we will see issues in states when it comes to voter suppression issues.
Okay, thanks. I have a question here from the chat here from Carolyn Byerly. She says, how is the NAACP working with grassroots groups composed of young people, like in the Black Votes Matter?
Yeah, we are working closely with grassroots groups directly. Many of you know we have a youth and college division at NAACP, one of the few organizations or grassroots organizations that actually have a grouping already of students, college level students and below, but is doing the work in real time. We are in partnership actually this upcoming week, which is public. We all know we're embarking on the 60th anniversary of the March on Washington next Saturday. Next Friday, there is a young person civil rights meeting for young organizers in the civil rights movement that's going to be led up by NAACP and NCNW directly, where we'll be bringing in young folks from across the country to begin to talk through strategy. But it's not just civil rights folks, it's also young folks from other organizations in real time, think the Youth Alliance, et cetera. NAACP is in partnership with so many of the groups directly overall in terms of all things coordination, collaboration, and communication around that. I'll lift up in 2022, NAACP, we're using the word relational organizing. Our youth and college division ran an aggressive relational organizing campus program directly in several states. So we worked with groups, particularly in Georgia, Black Voters Matter, directly in the state of Georgia, and a few other groups there on the ground where they did aggressive voter registration, voter turnout, and voter education with young people. The thing that we are going to add on going into 2024 is how do we lift up the voices of young people? We're starting to do that in real time. We'll be doing some stuff over the next few weeks, particularly starting next week at the March on Washington, where we'll begin to have testimonials, et cetera, from young people, not just influencers and celebrities, but just everyday people lifting up the issues and really engaging folks in community together to, one, get them active and involved, but then two, also for them to help get their counterparts involved as well in the election. So a lot of work in the partnership space for young folks.
Okay, thanks. And NCNW is the National Council of Negro Women, correct?
National Council of Negro Women, Siobhan Arlon Bradley is the new president for NCNW.
Okay, thank you. And also a request that you put your contact information in the chat room.
Happy to.
Okay, very good. Now, Judy Kang is here also. We want to talk also about misinformation and disinformation. And Judy works with Adam Powell at the University of Southern California's Cybersecurity Initiative and Election Cybersecurity Initiative. So Judy, you're on. Please take the floor.
Okay. Let me share the screen.
Okay.
Can you all see this?
Yes.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I'm delighted to be here with you today. As Richard introduced me, my name is Judy Kang, and I'm a program manager at the University of Southern California's Election Cybersecurity Initiative. We are not a government entity. We are nonpartisan, focusing on election cybersecurity, disinformation, misinformation, crisis communication, and resilience. Our impact stretches across all 50 states, as we've teamed up with media and university partners all across the country. This year, our efforts have gone global as we've organized international conferences in diverse locations from UK, Canada to Taiwan. And we have upcoming events scheduled in Korea and South Africa. I'd like to shed some light on our disinformation and misinformation sessions. Our aim is to empower the public by highlighting how simple it is for false information to spread through their own social media channels. We arm individuals with tools to discern the credibility of the information they encounter before they consider sharing it. I will now quickly demonstrate how our disinformation and misinformation presenter, Sarah Mosrad, begins her presentation. She starts by defining misinformation and information, showcasing their impact and explaining the challenges in containing false information. To illustrate, let's consider the example of Bill Murray running for president. This seemingly credible and persuasive news piece is taken from a trusted news outlet, NBC. The presence of a professional image of Bill Murray, along with a new news headline that appears to quote him directly, as to its believability. Additionally, the author's name is provided and the content is tagged as news. As a result, people believe this story. We observed the indication on social media, including the creation of the I'm with Murray hashtag by an individual. Also, this person shared a link that was far from safe. A closer examination reveals that the link contains a .com, .co domain, which actually originates from a hoax website. Through 2023, our initiative has evolved further. We've incorporated an AI component into our modules, a timely addition given the headlines about AI-generated disinformation and misinformation. We've witnessed how AI can craft convincing propaganda, with deepfake technology becoming increasingly sophisticated. It's now capable of mimicking real people with intricate facial expressions and voice tones. Disinformation has even crept into unexpected places like video games. And it's alarming how it can reach us through familiar communication channels, courtesy of friends and family. The pace of technological advancement is so rapid that detecting what is real will become increasingly challenging, even for the news media. USC Election Cybersecurity programs offer informative sessions on disinformation and misinformation. These sessions provide an opportunity for people to hear not only from our presenters, but also from various local voices, including elected officials, journalists, and party chairs. On our website, we've compiled tools and resources sourced from both national and local organizations. These valuable materials are showcased to our workshop audiences with accurate and reliable information. Think ship. This catchy phrase serves as a reminder to stay vigilant, and our presenter often employs it towards the conclusion of the disinformation and misinformation module. Also, there's a helpful checklist available for your organization's use. Feel free to explore our website more information and consider subscribing to our weekly newsletter. Additionally, we are more than happy to come to you. Here's an image of our Executive Director, Adam Clayton Powell III, speaking at the National Association of Black Journalists about AI and election cybersecurity. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me directly via email. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Judy. I wonder whether there is anything that you should be sure that you want journalists to be sure to know in covering this 2024 election.
Everybody is very worried about if what they are seeing is even real. So I would say they make sure that what they are carrying is very credible and they have a right resources to use.
Okay, thank you. All right, any questions about misinformation or voter suppression for either of the last two speakers, Dominik or Judy? Okay. All right, very good. Thank you both of you. We want to move on now. We're going to go to our discussion period, and we have Jessica Fulton with us, who is the new interim director of the Joint Center for Political and Economic Studies. And many of us have used the Joint Center for research, questions about politics and now economics. And so I wanted Jessica to tell us what they're up to now in 2023 and how this may relate to the 2024 election. So Jessica, please begin.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me to join, and thank you for organizing the discussion. This has been really interesting so far, and I'm really glad that I was able to join. So my name is Jessica Fulton. I'm the interim president and the permanent vice president of policy at the Joint Center. So in my current role, I'm responsible for overseeing the organization and maintaining some consistency during our transition, but really like my real job, right, is showing up and overseeing our research and policy team and leading our economic policy research. And my background is really in the on the economic side of things. So it's been really interesting to hear the questions posed towards the Biden-Harris campaign folks around the economic narrative or economic messaging. For the folks who aren't familiar with the Joint Center, we are America's Black think tank. We were founded in 1970 to support civil rights activists transition to elected officials, and we've really expanded our mission in recent years. Right now, we're focused on providing compelling and actionable policy solutions to eradicate the persistent and evolving barriers to the full freedom of Black people in the United States. And we're working on a number of different issue areas that we think are important now. We think they're going to be important during the policy debates around the election, and we think that they're going to be important moving forward in coming years. So right now we're focusing on economic policies around tax policy and race, small business, household economic security. We're thinking a lot about workforce policy in terms of increasing access to high quality workforce development programs and high quality jobs for Black workers and learners. We're doing some work on tech policy. So we're thinking a lot about misinformation and disinformation and what policies need to be put in place to prevent the targeting of Black folks in that space. We're also working on data privacy and algorithmic bias and AI. And then we have a few issues that are kind of like longstanding Joint Center issues around increasing diversity among top staff on Capitol Hill and increasing Black appointees in the in White House appointed positions, right, in the Biden-Harris administration in this current period. So we're really looking to center Black voices in public policy debates and promote ideas that advance Black communities. I'll give a little bit of quick examples of some things that we've been doing recently that we think are important, and then I'll highlight a couple things we're doing moving forward. So earlier this year, we put out a report that it was titled Pessimism and Hope, a survey of the financial aspirations of Black Americans, where we partnered with NORC at the University of Chicago to survey 1,500 Black people across the country, specifically to understand like what are Black folks' financial goals and what do they see as barriers to achieving those goals, right? We put out some data, 5 charts to understand Black registered apprentices in the United States. And that really looked at registered apprenticeship data that the Department of Labor offered that had not been disaggregated and analyzed to figure out, well, what is going on with Black apprentices in this country, especially as we see a lot of investments being made into the trades, right, related to the infrastructure laws that have been passed. We also put out a report and are continuing to do some work around the state of Black students at community colleges, which looked at administrative data to understand the challenges that Black students were facing in community colleges and make recommendations for how to improve outcomes, right? Because Black folks are overrepresented among community college students, but they're not necessarily achieving the outcomes that we think that they should have. We also are doing work on congressional staff diversity, as I mentioned, which has really been about making sure that senators and folks in the House of Representatives are hiring top staff that represents the diversity of the country, because we know that those are the folks that are really doing a lot of the work on the day-to-day and making decisions. And then just quickly, I'll mention we are moving forward doing a lot of work around convening on behalf of Black communities. So we're trying to bring partners together and have been bringing partners together to have discussions like the one that we're having today, right? Making sure that there are thought leaders and advocates and activists and policymakers in the room. We just recently had an event featuring the Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, Wally Adeyemo, where he talked about the issues that Treasury is working on in terms of racial equity and where our folks need to get engaged to push for the priorities that would affect Black communities. And we'll be having a summit in October 19th in DC, where we'll bring together policymakers again to just discuss the issues that are affecting Black communities now and the things that we think will be happening in the future, as an opportunity to really make sure that our folks are engaged and prepared for the conversations and not coming to policy conversations, you know, once decisions have already been made, really being at the forefront of those conversations. So I'll pause there because I think I've gone over my 3 minutes, but thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jessica. Any questions for Jessica? Otherwise, we're going to go to our introductions and questions from people. And I'm going to go to the people who haven't said anything yet to see what's on their minds. Austin Fenner is one. Austin, do you please introduce yourself, and also, do you have a question that hasn't been asked yet for any of these folks?
Good afternoon. My name is Austin Fenner. I'm a freelance New York journalist, a veteran of the New York Daily News, New York Post. I was thinking about the 15-year-old celebrity who had posted her death, and it was a fake death, and the news reported it as death. And we were just talking about disinformation and how that story got out there. I was just curious about all that, and maybe Judy can talk about that issue.
Judy, do you have any response to that?
Sorry, can you repeat the question? I lost you for 10 seconds.
About a week ago, there was a young social media sensation. I can't recall her name right now, but they announced that she had died and her brother had died. And the news media had picked up the story. And then a day later, we learned the young rapper was still alive. So I was just thinking about that issue as you were talking about disinformation getting through the gatekeepers and making sure what is reported is actually true and not true.
I want to first clarify the difference between misinformation and disinformation. Misinformation is just false information, no intention, and disinformation is manufactured intentionally to influence people. So I am not aware of this news or just fake news, but if there was any reason why that news was created, that's considered to be disinformation. And whoever shared that not verified news story on their social media, it's their responsibility, and that's what we are trying to educate the people, not to just to let them know that you unintentionally could be involved in this fake news distribution. And once you do that, it's very hard to get back to that didn't happen.
Okay, thank you, Judy. Deborah Berry, if you got, can you introduce yourself, and also, do you have anything that hasn't been asked yet?
Hi, I'm Deborah Berry. I'm a national correspondent with USA Today. And no, I don't, not right now, Richard. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine.
Opening though. Thank you.
No worries. All right, Mark Williams. Mark, can you hear us?
Hello, everyone. I'm Mark Williams. I'm the opinion editor at the Baltimore Banner. Richard, I don't have anything really specific right now, but it's just great to hear this discussion and all the insight about the direction and some of the thoughts about the direction the Biden campaign might be taking are fascinating. So thanks always for inviting me.
Okay, thanks
being
for
here
being there,
much
first
more.
timer. Karen Berry, did you? I can't remember whether you said things out loud or just in the chat.
Oh, I haven't said anything out loud.
Okay.
Yet. Karen
Introduce yourself,
Berry,
please.
copy chief for Anscape, formerly the Undefeated with ESPN. And I believe all of the Biden folks have left, but I had
All of them left?
I think they're all gone.
Okay.
But I want to say it anyway.
Good.
Because I watch the political pundits talking about Trump, and I have come to the conclusion that anyone who says that Trump could win in 2024 should back it up with statistics or something. I wanted to follow up on what Mary asked, because she asked a question I wanted to ask about the fact that there are 12 states in play for because of redistricting challenges for 2024. So to me, that puts the whole election in play, because we don't know what will happen. And what I wanted to ask was whether the Biden's campaign is tracking numbers. Are there any numbers about, well, we think the redistricting could go a certain way? Do they have solid numbers on that as to whether there is increasing support for Biden or declining support for Biden, or there's increasing support for Trump? I understand that they are not here, but
well, they'll see the questions in the chat.
Oh,
and
okay.
You have their email addresses now.
Yes. So I just find it really irresponsible to say that he could win, Trump could win, but you don't know if Trump could win. So I guess most of the time when they are saying that, it's a setup to express an opinion on the indictments. So I understand that part, but I just find it so objectionable.
Well, you see the polls that show them neck and neck. Biden.
I kind of I'm registered as an independent.
Yes.
But I see that as Biden catching up and going going ahead of Trump. So
right.
That's just
okay.
my take on it.
These polls are just a snapshot in time, as they say anyway.
51% next week,
Yeah,
50% this week, and then 51% next week. But that shows a bias. I understand that part too. But I just have this feeling, just my comment, that I guess I'm just baffled by the support that continues. And I also wonder why there don't seem to be very many interviews of people who support Biden.
Okay. All right. Jill Geisler. Mary, I see your hand.
Well,
let's go with Jill first, then we'll go to you, Mary.
Dominik, I'd like to address a question to Dominik, if I may. Hi, everybody. I'm Jill Geisler, the Bill Platt Chair in Leadership and Media Integrity at Loyola University Chicago. Dominik, recently in Wisconsin, and I can put this in the chat, Appleton High School, a public high school that has a small population of journalists of color, posted on Facebook that there was going to be a meet and greet for students of color to come meet the special counselor, to come meet the principal, because we want all students to feel welcome. There was also an all-school event as well. The Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, I live in Wisconsin, even though I'm talking Chicago here. My university's in Chicago, but the Wisconsin Institute for Law and Liberty, which is a conservative, self-described conservative law firm, threatened to sue the school if it did not change the language, calling it racist and exclusionary. I think we're seeing more of this effort to vilify targeted efforts. And I'm wondering what the NAACP is doing or can do to help prepare organizations that understand the importance of having opportunities for safe conversations, of cohort conversations, and now may have to defend themselves against lawsuits for doing so.
I think that's a really good question. I appreciate it, Jill, and thank you for raising that. First, if you could drop that in the chat for me.
I'm doing it.
Thank you. I'm going to grab that, and I'll actually be in Wisconsin this week, so I'm going to talk with our Wisconsin State Conference and our NAACP there, who's pretty strong on the ground, to see how they're engaging around that. But there's a few things. One, currently right now, NAACP, we have what we call a diversity no matter what campaign. We launched that a little bit after, and I'll drop the link in the chat, a little bit after the affirmative action decision that happened earlier this summer around that. And it was also in preparation of what we're seeing in states around curriculums, et cetera, whether it's Florida or Arkansas, and the list is beginning to grow around that. There's a few things. NAACP, as you all know, we're big at two things. One, all things policy advocacy, but then two, there is our litigation piece around that. One, we heavily engage in litigation as we see these cases or situations that come up. We always lead directly, clearly from our state, but the national definitely leans in and to join. What we've been doing lately, since we've seen so many attacks in states, rather around diversity issues or folks expressing or advocating for themselves. One of the things that we've tried to do at the national level, but particularly at the state and local level, is to be in partnership on the ground directly. One of the things that we're doing is also making sure that there is one clear message as well with all of our groups and partners that we're working with in real time around that. We're going to see this, and I don't want to bring it back to the election cycle, and I'm 90% sure, and Judy just really kind of walked through the difference between mis and disinformation as well, but we're going to see a lot of these type of attacks going through November 2024 and beyond. And so the things that we can do is, one, prepare people on what their rights are, particularly young people, because we don't want young people to feel discouraged, but then also, two, making sure that our litigation arm, as well as our policy advocacy arm, is ready to go at all times in these states. The last thing I'll lift up that I think is important to share here, many of you may know, we recently just finished our 114th convention in Boston, Massachusetts a few weeks ago. And one of the things that we did, and I'm responsible for in my team, we actually brought our political and legislative chairs from across the country 2 days in prior to the convention early to really have conversations and discussions and strategy, particularly around this topic here that you're lifting up. There's another piece that I can lift up. In the coming days, there's going to be a strategy session with civil rights leaders in real time. And I want to go into full detail around that. But all of the civil rights leaders, the Big Eight, which we call them, will be meeting together and huddling around issues such as this to ensure that our resources are properly there to help defend and protect democracy at all costs. So I hope that answers a little bit of your question, but we're deep in it. I was not familiar of this case in Wisconsin. I am taking it right now, and while we're chatting, I'm moving it over to our folks in Wisconsin as well in the field.
Thank you.
All right, Mary Chow.
Well, I see Nolu is gone too, and I wanted to piggyback off what Nolu said about Gen Z. And the Biden folks are gone too. Do they realize in the battleground states of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, there are a lot of colleges, and what their strategy is? I wonder for recruiting college students to go to the polls. That's the Gen Z vote, and that could be make or break in some of the battleground states. So that's something hopefully they could answer, or perhaps even Dominik.
I'm happy. I am not a representative of the Biden-Harris campaign.
I know that.
I'm
but you know, you're politically active, and young people are notoriously not engaged in politics.
Yeah.
And then in many of the battleground states, they're big college towns and represent a huge number of potential voters. And I mean, how do you get young people involved?
Yeah, I think it's a couple of things, though. I think we have to go back to 2022, last November, as well as 2018. Both of those midterm election cycles, and in 2020, we'll continue from 2018 to 2020 to 2022. We'll continue to see an increase of young voters, voter participation at the polls, right? And we have to continue that momentum around that. I know I can speak for NAACP. We're going to always lead with issues. Clearly, we're nonpartisan, but there are so many issues that are important to young folks, whether it's student debt, whether it is the climate issue or the climate crisis that is happening as well. So I think what I would urge any organizations and or campaigns is begin to have discussions with young people around those issues in real time. I think you think about Pennsylvania, you lift it up, and so many other states of the college towns. We cannot take the young voters' vote for granted. We can't take what we saw in 2018 and 2020, as well as 2022 for granted, right? 2024 was just in a different place. That was a year of social unrest, if you will. And so I think folks knew what was at stake. I think for 2024, there's a different conversation in terms of how we're engaging. It was good to hear the Biden campaign talk about relational organizing, but for NAACP and for voters of color, we're going to really try to penetrate on the issues that matter to them and connect that back to the ballot box. And young people have to be the face of the campaign and have to be the face of 2024 as well. Truly, democracy is at stake. And I think we all know when democracy is moving into the right direction, oftentimes young people are in the forefront of the movement. So what does that look like and how does that happen? I think that is something folks are wrestling with. But for NAACP, we are diving deep with young folks as well as Black men. Those are two groups that we are looking at in real time and treating those groups special in a way to ensure enthusiasm is up.
Thank you.
What is it about Black men, by the way, that you're concerned about?
I mean, the numbers are there, right? Let's be clear, Black men are voting. So I want to make sure that we keep that in the forefront. I think what is happening because we're seeing some drop off of Black men, where they may be voting more conservatively or in different ways, or may not be voting at the top of the ticket, skipping that and voting at the bottom of the ticket. Black men are voting. I think the issue that it comes to with Black men, I think that Black men and what we're seeing, even from research, that their issues are not in the forefront political conversation. And that's just the reality. I think what Black men, we all know, and research have shown us, the economy is a big piece. So jobs, the wallet is like to say. So what does that look like? I think we have to reimagine what criminal justice look like. I think it's more of a conversation around race and justice, not necessarily criminal justice for Black men. I think also, just like any community, Black men also, we're not a monolith. And so I think with Black men, they're looking deeply, and as you can see, I believe Congressman or Cedric had mentioned, or Quentin, that they're doing some Black men engagement there in Milwaukee, coming up around the debate around that. So I think the campaign sees that we on the policy side, and the NAACP has been in heavy conversations with the vice president directly around Black men engagement from a policy standpoint, to be very clear, from a policy, not an electoral standpoint, around how do we engage Black men in a deeper way. I think there's just real engagement that has to happen with Black men. I think it's bigger than barbershops. Black men are in a lot of different places. So how do we reach them? How do we touch them? And then most importantly, when you reach and touch them, how do you bring them along the journey? But I think Black men feel like they're on an island by themselves in so many ways when it comes to the political landscape in this country.
Interesting. Okay, thanks. Greg Morris.
Hi, yes, Greg Morris, a tenured assistant journalism professor at Hunter College. I want to thank Richard again and again for keeping me plugged into really important journalism matters. I'm going to make this quick. I'm working on a what I call an ethnographic memoir of at Hunter College, is tentatively titled "The Most Corrupt Department." On the possibly most corrupt Hunter College campus at CUNY. I've been taping and doing a lot of surreptitious taping about information. If anyone is interested and wanted to know what's happening at Hunter CUNY, particularly at Hunter CUNY, with students and professors and various investigations that need to be exposed, you can get in touch with me. And this was a wonderful, all of journalism is impressive and incredible for me. And this is just another one that I really appreciate, that I was able to read everybody and stuff. And I'll be studying the information, for the next few days. Thanks very much, Richard.
Okay, thank you, Greg. Lynn Adrian, are you there? See your picture.
I am.
Okay.
And one of the things that I was thinking about here in terms of the how the Democratic Party goes forward in trying to engage people is the idea of what's at stake. And I think that's one of the things that keeps coming up again and again with journalism, as opposed to the polls, et cetera, who's up, who's down. What's at stake? Let's look at the issues themselves. We talked about that a little in terms of the economy and things like that, but how do we as journalists frame the discussion in these next 18 months or so about what's actually at stake for the constituencies that we cover?
Very good. Okay.
Could I add just one thing that you might want to think about that will be coming up for the next administration and the next Congress? So the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act that were the Trump tax cuts that were passed in 2017 expire in 2025, right? And so that's one big policy debate that we're paying attention to in terms of what revenues are available for all the stuff that we think we want government to do, but also like just how we shape our tax code and whether or not it benefits Black communities. And so that's one, it's not a sexy topic, right? But it's a really important one, and it may be something that you all want to keep in mind that we're watching closely.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. Leroy Chapman, you still there? Okay, his name is there.
I'm still here. I'm sorry.
Okay, good. Do you want to add anything, or well, first introduce yourself, and then you can any other questions you might have for folks, or statements you want to make.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. Let me get back on camera here. Hey, I'm Leroy Chapman. I am the executive editor at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So obviously we are covering this from a couple of angles. I mean, the presidential race is also in Georgia a courtroom case because of what's been going on here. But ultimately, I guess as we think about moving forward and covering this, we are going to be looking at this in a couple of fronts. I mean, one is clearly looking to create the kind of feedback loop with our voters to talk about the issues that really most affect them. So we're doing a lot of polling. We're doing some things that we're doing in partnership. And also we are going to be looking at, and I'm glad we talked about disinformation and that sort of thing, because we're going to be looking at that pretty exclusively. And I think the last thing too is we've talked about on this call, the voting and confidence in our system. That is going to continue to come up. We're going to continue to follow it. So we're putting some added resources behind that, and also, again, seeking out some partnership as well as we cover that, and also try to figure out what's happening in other states that are going to be targeted. And it's going to be critical in those states that are more battleground states like Georgia. Now that we're in that category, it was good to hear about what's going on in Florida, what's going on in North Carolina. So these southern states that will be pivotal in making a choice, we will be following in all of those terms.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Chevy Lassiter, are you there? Of course you're there, Chevy. Chevy? Oh, she's on the move. She's our producer for this webcast. All right. Eleanor Vega. Well, we
Hi,
heard you clear
Richard.
your throat.
Sorry, I didn't hit the mute on time. Thank you again for
Well, introduce yourself, please, and then
oh, okay.
Go ahead.
I'm Eleanor Vega. I'm a freelance journalist up in the Los Angeles area dealing with this Hurricane Hillary tropical storm. This weather is crazy. And I'm also the SPJ chair for the Diversity and Inclusion Committee. But thank you again, Richard, for just such an insightful conversation and important topic. The only thing I just want to say is that, you know, I didn't get a chance to ask the Biden people this, but I just hope that that they realize that if they're going after the Latino vote, that there are many, that Latinos come in many shapes and sizes, and they're not a monolith, as they always think that they are. And, you know, the majority of Latinos that live in this country are Mexican, American and Mexican, and they're starting to go into the conservative side. And a lot of it has to do with the fact that they don't feel that the Democrats are really speaking to them. And so, you know, you have Colombians, you have Cubans, you have Dominicans, you know, people from Central America. So I think that they really need to figure out a way of trying to not just create one message for all Latinos, but they're going to have to do a little bit more work and really try to do outreach for each different group. So anyway, I'm sure that there'll be a conversation on this later on, but thank you again for a great conversation.
Okay. Eleanor, what are the issues that Mexican Americans are particularly concerned about?
Education, the economy, work, security. I mean, that's one of the reasons why you're seeing a huge rise in unions. A lot of them, especially in Nevada, are made up of Latinos that work, you know, in hotels and things like that. And they just don't feel that, you know, they're talking to them as far as how their life is going to improve. And immigration is in there too, but it's not, you know, one of the top 3 or 4 issues that they're concerned about.
Okay, thank you for that insight. We didn't get to Chandra Hazlett, but also with the Joint Center.
Hi, thank you, Richard. This is my first time attending this. I just want to thank Richard and the other organizers for giving the Joint Center a platform to either introduce or reintroduce our work and research to you all. I'm a former reporter, so this space feels very special to me. I've moved over to the public relations side, but I dropped a bunch of links and the chat for the research that Jessica mentioned. I also put a link for you all to sign up for our newsletter if you're interested in attending our summit in October that Jessica referenced. So again, thank you so much for the opportunity for Jessica to talk a little bit about the Joint Center. And I'm hoping to see you all at a future roundtable. This is really excellent.
Well, you know, two of our roundtable members here, Lynn Adrian and Betty Ann Williams, worked at the Joint Center. So
oh, wonderful.
so
Small world.
yeah, about that. So that okay. Mary Curtis, who I think you said something earlier, but is there anything you want to?
No, just more, please, because this is really good. And thank you for the folks in Georgia and other places. I'm based, as I say, in North Carolina, though my office is in DC, and I will probably see you on the campaign trail. Mary C. Curtis, I'm a columnist and podcast host at Roll Call all the time, and sometime at Slate with their What Next podcast, a senior leader with the Op-Ed Project, and also contributor to the NPR affiliate WFAE in Charlotte. And as I said, this is obviously an incredible conversation with 2024 looming. The only thing else I would like to say is be great to do something on security. I've noticed a ramp up in some of the trolling, just as we see folks are doing it with the prosecutors and the grand jurors. You know, I was name checked in some nationally syndicated column by someone from the Heritage Foundation. And then, so of course, the trolls start. So maybe for a future one on, you know, defending your online and all of that, because it's getting really rough out there.
You know, there was a session on that at the NABJ convention about Black women and Black female journalists and this whole.
Yeah, I was there.
Oh, you were there. There you go. So you
Yeah.
can bring your expertise then to.
Yeah, I don't get it as much as some, but obviously folks like Nikole Hannah-Jones, although she said you get it enough, but it is, you know, you can tell the tone of it is a lot different, and sometimes it's quite personal. So it's something to be on the lookout for as the campaign and these indictments go down. Thanks.
Right. Thank you.
Oh, Richard, I just wanted to interject.
Yes.
I've been trolled with comments like Chinese eat bats during the whole coronavirus pandemic. So I think it's just women of color we face.
Yeah, this was discussed at the AHA convention too, as I recall.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and probably at NAHJ, though I don't recall it specifically.
So
Okay,
for whatever
thanks.
reason, women of color are targets.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Well, that's a good
Lynn, is
topic.
your hand up?
Yeah, it is. Just wanted to make one other point, which is that, you know, from 2015 on, everybody keeps focusing, or a lot of media coverage keeps focusing on the Trump voter, and whether after he won, after he lost, they keep on coming back to those voters and saying, how do you feel now? What do you think now? Have you changed your mind now? And I really think that there should be a concerted effort to talk to the people who didn't vote for him and ask what their opinions are and about where their attention is and what issues, as I said, you know, issue oriented coverage should be focused on them, because there are so many mainstream media outlets who still see the coverage of the Trump voter as the way to enhance readership and ratings. We have to counteract that, because they keep on going back to the same people over and over again to say, how do you feel now? How do you feel now? Well, we kind of know how they feel now. Let's do some other reporting.
I hear that. Okay. All right. Anybody else before we wrap up? Okay. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining us today. This is all. We're going to have the chat room comments printed out and will be distributed to those who are here, and for those who are watching on Facebook, if they'd like a copy as well, just message me, and we'll do that. Our next session will be hopefully, knock on wood, a hybrid one, which means that we will be able to be in person as well as have people on the Zoom. So take care, keep on the lookout for a notice about that one. Again, thanks everyone. Appreciate it. And We're going to have this also on YouTube for those who want to watch it again or those who were unable to see it the first time. So stay tuned for the link to that too. So thanks everybody, and enjoy the rest of your Sunday.
Thank you.
All right, thank
Bye.
you. Okay,
Thank you, Richard.
thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Take care.
Okay.
Have a good week, Rich.
All right, same to you.